What's up, beautiful people, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for everybody who's watched a single video, a single second of any video, my dubs of the day, Black Business Booming, Impactful Conversations, any of that. And I'm going to invite you to go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. What are you waiting for? Let's go. Subscribe now. This is another segment episode of Impactful Conversations, and I know it's going to be great because my guest today is awesome and impactful. So I'm so excited to bring you another edition of Impactful Conversation. So without further ado, I want you to introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are and a little background, whatever you want to give the people with, just to open it up a little bit.
Thank you, Mike, for that very energetic introduction. I love it. So my name is Edwina Nunez-Gordon, and definitely thank you for inviting me and really opening up the space for us to have this conversation. My name is Edwina, and I can say that I am a project manager, learning and development expert and professor by day, empowerment goddess by night. So I've been in learning and development, I want to say for over 10 years. My career actually started in mental health. So I was a therapist, group therapist. I was a crisis counselor, so working at the suicide prevention hotline for a number of years. And that's really where my coaching experience, I think, started without me really knowing it. When you're working in a crisis hotline, I mean, you're in the moment. You're with the person wherever they're at. You're listening with your entire body. All you have is that phone call. So at the time, I was doing coaching, but I didn't really know. And I just love helping people. I love really being in that space where folks are vulnerable when they're going through really difficult times, and really kind of leaning into that and holding the space for them to feel all of that, and helping them find the light and kind of, walk through that. I then stumbled into training and fell in love with training. I've been in it ever since, definitely over a decade. And it kind of ties into that because my passion is all about awareness, bringing awareness into the space. And when it came to mental health, there's a lot of stigma around mental health. A lot of people shy away from it. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to know it. If I look for help, I'm going to be deemed crazy or whatever it may be. So for me, going into the training space and going into the communities and really destigmatizing that and taking these complex information and not diluting it, but making it more simplified and connecting to people on a relatable level. I fell in love with it. So I've been in training for quite some time. And the empowerment goddess, I kind of just came up with that in the fly. But for the past...
Wait, time out, pause. So you just came up with that? Because listen, I'm listening right to your intro. And that was the first thing I was going to go back to. I was going to say, wait, reverse that by night. What? That's so amazing. Like, go trademark that, because that was so dope. When you said it, I was like, boom. And that right there, to everybody watching, it's going to be an impactful conversation, because even how you started out and what you've done to get to the point where you are now. And of course, I'm biased. I love coaches. I love coaches. So another coach. And so just amazing to take this, but continue. I just thought that was amazing. You just came up with it on the fly.
Maybe the reason why it felt appropriate to introduce myself that way, because by day I'm still doing my 9 to 5, which there's some coaching elements to it, but I know it's kind of removed. And then by night, I say kind of like, Batman, Bruce Wayne, and then Batman by night. And it's because for the past, I want to say 2 years, I've definitely been in this transformational journey. And in some ways, those two areas of my life were very separated. And but I have found that is where my passion lies. And that experience for me kind of brought everything kind of full circle. Or it's like, all of these experiences that I've been gathering for the past decade and a half, that kind of seemed like I was just stumbling into them, and they just kind of happened because it was a good opportunity. Okay, I'll try that. Okay, I'll try this. And all of a sudden now I can see how they all kind of fit into this bigger puzzle. And I'm all about empowerment and all of that experiences that came with me along the way. I think it all was all about empowering people. And the last 2 years have been about empowering myself. because I can only empower others to the extent that I'm able to empower myself.
Love that. That's amazing. I tell people that, you may hear that in coaching and it may seem cliche, but even the word itself, cliche, it's cliche because it has a meaning to a lot of people. So in the coaching space, you hear that often, like empower, you empower people and that empowerment. And so I just say, I want people to unlock their power. It's the same thing. I want them to be empowered, right? And that when you get to that point of realizing, right, that switch turns on when you realize, okay, in order for me to empower people, I got to make sure that I'm empowered. So when you said that, I was like, yes, it's like everything you're saying is you're throwing me early alley-oops already. And I love it. It's so awesome because that's huge. And that's kind of how I think about it too. I tell people, you can't pour from an empty pitcher. You can't pour from an empty cup. If someone says, okay, hey, Mike, can I have some of your tea? Sure. When I finish this and it's done out of my mug, I can't pour you anything. There's nothing left. So what do I have to do? I have to fill that up, put some more in it, or get you something from a different container. So now I'm not even the right person to help you because I'm empty. They got to go to another container. Oh, love it, love it, love it. So impactful conversations. So before even thinking back to young Edwina and growing up or coming up, what are some impactful moments? This is a question I love to ask because it's the something in the background before we got to this point as adults, right? What were some impactful moments or an impactful moment for you growing up or in your upbringing?
No, I certainly had a lot of those. And when you extended that invitation, I mean, that's where kind of like my mind went, like, what are some of the experiences that you want to talk about? Because there certainly are a lot. And, I'll definitely answer your question, but I think looking at it now from this level of, I'm going to say I'm fully healed because it is a lifelong process it's a journey, right? But now I do have a better perspective. It's almost like having a new pair of glasses. I can look back into the past and see those experiences slightly different than what I had seen them before. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But no, as a child, definitely there were a lot of experiences that had, big impact on me. And I don't think I realized how impactful they were at the time until now. Like I said, I'm looking back with a new pair of glasses. But so I am a first generation Dominican. My mother was actually a teenage mom. So right away, that's not going to be oftentimes the most bumpless road. So, so my mom, came to the US when she was 16, kind of sort of was brought here and left with family members that she barely knew. And shortly thereafter, had me. And then had my brother less than two years later. My biological father was never really in the picture. And having been here as a teenager with no high school education, no GED, the jobs that, she had access to, there's no way that she could do them and also have two small children. So at the age of 3, she sent me back to the Dominican Republic to kind of stay there with family members. And this is a story that it's not unheard of, right? A lot of folks that come from the Caribbean, different countries have this experience where family members, parents kind of leave their child behind in order to come here and create a better future, or, they send kids there to stay with family members. So I did have that experience. So from the age of 3 and 7, which I have kids 8 and 10. And when I think of my children at that age, it's such a crucial age. When you're talking about forming relationships with other people, forming healthy attachments, being able to be in the space that you can question things, that is when that happens, right? When you're pushing back and saying, no, and this is my space, and vocalizing your opinions, and where do you fit into this world? So for me, having been, in the Dominican Republic, and to be honest with you, when I look back at my childhood and even early adolescence, my memory is spotty, right? I remember some things, but a lot of it is very spotty. As I kind of venture these last 2 years and really diving in deep in certain kind of wounds that I never touched on, I realized that, as a child, I was very quiet. I was very reserved. I was the good kid. And oftentimes, I would say for the majority of the time, no one was ever really asking, hey, Edwina, how are you feeling? Hey, Edwina, what do you need? hey, Edwina, do you know why your mom is not here? And I'm sure I'm not the only child to ever say that. I mean, oftentimes I think, adults are like, children, for whatever reason, they seem to think children don't have experiences or feelings or, kind of they're just in the background.
Yeah, be a kid. Just
sit there, right? So, so I want to say that was a big impact. And I think, as an adult and then going into other experiences, I can see how I was primed to experience certain things, because being as a child and feeling like I didn't really have a voice, not that I was told you don't have a voice, but the space was never created for me to feel like, yes, it's okay for me to question certain things. I came back when I was about 7.5. And again, when parents leave children when they're 3 and you come back when you're 7, it's almost like the expectation that you have the same child. No, 4 years have transpired. It's a different, developmental stage. And having that, how do you now create a relationship? How do you nurture that? How do you, that didn't really happen. And I love my mother. I have so much reverence for her. I mean, again, now being a mom and being an adult, looking back, I mean, she is absolutely an amazing human being, but she parented through the skills that she had, almost through a trauma lens. You can only give what you have. So that was a huge impactful experience for me. Another one that I can definitely highlight was, like I mentioned, my biological father wasn't in the picture when I came back at 7.5. My mother had remarried, and that wasn't discussed with us. We kind of just landed here. All of a sudden, we're finding little notes with little hearts. And my brother and I like, oh, mommy has a boyfriend. So like, that's how we just, kind of looked at it. And surely enough, she did describe that she had gotten remarried. And my stepdad, who was an amazing human being, was actually in prison at the time. And we went to go see him in prison. That's how I met him for the first time. Don't remember the trip, just remember kind of going to a place where it was gray and the glass and picking up the phone. And right away was dad. Right away was just like, this is my father, because I didn't really have that father figure. Shortly later he was released, and he was an amazing stepdad. Was really supportive there for me. My basketball games, helped me with my science projects, was also always present. So my adolescence was pretty stable up until 17, where by 19 he had been deported. And it was a voluntary deportation. And I feel like this could be a whole other segment. But in the 90s, the Clinton administration had passed an anti-terrorism act, or an immigration law, that if someone had an aggravated felony, and I say that in quotation marks, because again, I feel like certain terms are redefined to try and fit certain people into it. So after a decade of having done his time, had been rehabilitated, my father had done nothing short of a speeding ticket. At that time, I was 17 when this all kind of started. My mom had a friend who was a lawyer and kind of said, we would always travel every summer. And that summer we were slated to go to the Dominican Republic. And she kind of said, just be careful. There's a lot of folks who are getting stopped and are getting deported for minor things. Even though my dad had no legal problems because he had a previous conviction or a record, this law was retroactive. So it didn't matter that it happened years ago. It didn't matter that you did your time. It was retroactive. And when I tell people this story, they think I'm leaving some details out. You're not telling the truth. It's like, oh, I am. So my mom had a friend who was a lawyer and kind of said, you might want to be careful. And I don't know who gave my mother this advice, but it's like, call the immigration office, check to see if he can fly. My mom didn't know English at the time, had me call as a 17-year-old who was fluent in English. And this is why I'm like, I know what happened because I was in the story. So I called the immigration office, and we thought that if we told them that's my uncle instead of my father, somehow that was going to dissuade anything. So I called the immigration office. Hey, my uncle wants to fly out. We want to see if he's on the list or if it's okay for him to fly. The immigration officer asked me for all of his information, name, date of birth, everything under the sun. And here I gave all this information, absolute blind trust. And he said, he's okay. He's okay to fly. He's not on the list. We went on our vacation. 2 weeks later, coming into the Miami International Airport, he was detained and he was held for questioning. We missed our flight. We had to sleep on the airport. My sister was like 5 or 6 years old. We slept on the airport, and a couple of hours later, we kept asking like, hey, what's going on? No, it'll be a couple more. We were just asking him some questions. A couple of hours later, they said he couldn't leave. He was detained at a detention center in Miami. We flew back on our own. And for the next month is my mom taking out second mortgages to try and get him just from Miami into, at the time we lived in Massachusetts. And for the next year and a half was court and all sorts of proceedings. And because of that law, what happens is that it took away the legal power from the judges to dismiss the case. The judge was like, there's nothing here. There's no basis to deport you. But because of this law, I no longer have the right to just dismiss the case. So you have two options. You can either voluntarily leave or go to the Supreme Court and fight it. By then I was in college. By then they had exhausted all financial means, and they decided to just voluntarily sign and leave. And the reason why that was so impactful is because obviously the stability that we had been able to gain was completely vanished. My family never really spoke about how they even made the decision for the voluntary deportation. I was just told this is what we decided. We never really talked about what that means for him to leave, and our family is kind of like broken apart. How do we maintain that family? Everyone kind of just did their own thing, and that's kind of how we function, I guess, in our family. It's like these things are happening in the background. You just keep it moving. You don't talk about it. You don't think about it. You stand up and you keep it moving. And that is how I was conditioned to kind of think through things. And that's why I have such a hard time with the word resilience. A lot of people think it's a strength, and it's a strength, but it's also, it's I wouldn't want to call it a weakness, but it's such a heavy word.
A burden.
Yes.
A burden. Yeah.
Oh my God, you're so resilient. It's like, yes, I am. But at the same time, if you're so resilient that you're constantly just pushing, you don't create the space to sit with the experience and to really honor what the impact that it has had on you, because you're just expected to just keep marching on. So to your point, it is such a burden. So that was a lot that I gave you, but those were the ones that kind of popped in when you asked the question. Yeah.
No, I think that was good, because that's why I love, every time I say this, that's why I love impactful conversations, because when I ask that question, it gives those layers, right? People see you, people see someone, and they don't realize all the things that got them to the point where they are right now. And one word that kept coming back up that you talked about, really two words jumped out to me. And one you just said a second ago was condition. So many times we're conditioned to, it was almost like triggering when you said all these things are going on and we don't talk about this. It just made me think about, I recently connected with my former high school to go back and speak to the football team before their first game. And relatives that were in school with me, like coming up through elementary and middle school, in school with me, that I had no idea I was related to until an organic conversation happened in middle school and made this connection. And it was like, wow. So it's all these things, and that's just a family thing, right? But it's other things, trauma, incidents, whether it be good or bad that happen. It's like, we don't talk about that. We're conditioned to talk about the things we want to talk about, but all this other stuff, we're going to ignore that. It's going on. It's right here in our face, but we got to keep going this way, So when you said that, it made me think about it. And the other part of that word that kept coming up, right, is the space. So many times, often, because kids, like you said, as a child, an adolescent, a kid, a teenager, you don't have any space, right? You stay in a child's place.
Yes.
It's no space for acknowledging the things that's going on and all those changes that you went through by 7, and then as an adolescent and a teenager. And so I think as an adult, one thing that I tell people, one of the most important things you can do for yourself is start your journey of self-discovery. And that's going back to that child Edwina, that child Mike, and figuring out how does this, okay, what happened, but also how did it affect me? And how am I carrying that? How am I not dealing with it or coping to this day? So when you said space, it's amazing. Creating that space is so important. And I think you have to get to that point of maturity, and that mind-heart connection to say, yeah, I want to look around that corner that I've been avoiding. Because it's like a lot. So, you said a lot, but I think it was amazing in giving that background to bringing you to where you are now. So as an adult, in your mind, when we hear this word, impact, it's behind my headrest, but impactful, right? Impactful conversations. What is your idea of impact as an adult?
I mean, it's funny as you were saying all of that, how taking the time to look at those things that we've been ignoring and coming back to that word resilience, because I was conditioned to keep moving and not look. Those things never go away, right? Your body knows that they're happening. Your body keeps the score. There's a book that by that name of how your body just kind of retains all of this. And so for me, impact as an adult, and I guess, I can dive into my journey these past 2 years, right? So my thing is, you can either voluntarily choose to look, or the universe is gonna make you look.
Yeah. One way or the other.
One way or the other, you're going to be forced to look at it. And if you ignore, whether it's the universe calling, or it's not gonna end well, because things just continue to accumulate. So for me, where I stand now, wow. And my face lights up when I think about it, because I've been on this insane journey for almost 2 years now. And I feel like my impact comes from that journey and the self-discovery that I've gained in those past 2 years, and everything that we talked about kind of leads into that. So I guess I can dive right into that. So so earlier this year, I filed for divorce, married 15 years. We actually made 15 years this month. Because of COVID, things are taking forever, but we did file earlier this year and we were just waiting for paperwork. But and every time I tell someone, I filed for divorce of nearly 15 years, and the first thing that comes out of their mouth is like, oh my God, I'm sorry. And I'm always like, no, it's okay. No, it's okay. Right. I'm all right. And the reason why I say that and why I kind of tell people it's okay, and oftentimes, again, people feel like, she's saying it's okay, so it must mean that she's just happy to be done with that. She's happy to be done with the relationship, with the marriage, good riddance. No, and it's nothing even about that. And when I say that journey for me was so impactful and so transformative, it wasn't even about the divorce and what that means to take 15 years of being with a partner and ideas that you have for your future and your family dynamic and your construct to be completely dissolved. For me, the journey didn't even come so much from that, and I'm trying to be mindful of the words that I use, because I want to be able to share my story and my truth. But I also want to make sure that I don't share his journey and his truth, because I think that they're very separate, and I want to be respectful of that. But for me, what happened was so impactful. And so it was one of those experiences that the universe had been kind of tapping me in the shoulder for years. Hey, no, I don't want to listen to you right now. My ego was comfortable. I'm good with this reality. I don't want to see what's behind that window or under that rug, and just kept shooing it away. And even though, again, resilient, I come from a strong line of very strong vocal women, which is such a huge contrast to feel like you have this very strong personality, and at the same time, you can rationalize things because you don't want to deal with it, right? So I'm only going to speak to the things that come to the surface and are very obvious, because I have to. I'm not a doormat. But while I can rationalize things and push them to the side so I don't have to face it, I'm going to do that because I don't want to deal with that. I want to keep it moving. So throughout my marriage, there were little instances that would happen. And of course, things were rationalized, minimized, Realities were distorted to kind of hide what was really happening. And I would only deal with the things that were obvious and rationalize others. And again, universe was like, hey, Edwina. So I want to say by 2017, 2018, let's just say that if I look back at those years, it's like I can see the little things that were happening, because it was just like, I'm going to take you on the ride of your life. You've been ignoring this that I'm pushing you to face. It's happening, but I'm going to do it in a way that I'm going to give you certain tools and certain spaces and certain things for you to be able to face it. And if you choose to really go through it and come out so much better on the other end. And for me, in October of 2019, it was the discovery that was made. My husband was having a sexual affair, and it was discovered in a way that could no longer be denied by him or me. And then shortly thereafter, a couple of days later, he disclosed that he had had multiple affairs throughout the marriage. And to say that my life was completely flipped upside down is an understatement. I mean, the way that I can describe it is like being a character in a storybook and someone deleting all of the words, right? It's like a character in a storybook and all of your pages are blank. Because now I can't look at the past, because the past that I thought I lived was a lie. And I don't know what the future is, because I mean, now I'm like, I have no idea which way this is going. And I don't even know where I stand in the space right now. So it was like, being like a character in a storybook where the pages are completely blank. And I am such, again, coming back to that power, to that fight in me, right? If I don't get it, if I don't understand it, I'm not going to like go down in a puddle and be like, victim mentality. No, I am going to read books. I am going to join support groups. I'm going to listen to podcasts. And because also that's a coping tool for me, right? It's a trauma response. If I don't get it, if I don't understand it, I am going to divulge whatever information I can find to try and make sense of it. And at the time, the way that things were happening, I came across this word. And again, I have a background in mental health, had never heard of this word, had never come across it, betrayal trauma. So there's this word that women who have experienced sexual betrayal, any kind of interpersonal betrayal, it's called betrayal trauma, because essentially, I mean, your body is almost like PTSD, like you're dealing with all of these impacts, because in some ways it's like you were disconnected from your intuition. So all the things that I talked about, my intuition knew something was happening, but I didn't want to listen to it. So I'm just going to disconnect from it. And when you disconnect from your intuition, you disconnect from your body, you disconnect from your, anything that can speak to what's happening, you disconnect from it. And part of that is this whole misalignment that's happening within your body, because your body is telling you something's off. And the more time you spend not listening to it, the more it wants to just get louder and louder. So for me, I came across this word betrayal trauma. It's like, So when I read more on it and I've read books and I joined support groups, it's like a big aha moment. Oh my God, this is what I have been experiencing. And then joining, it's the word for it. I'm not insane. And then joining other support groups with other women who have similar stories. And it was just absolutely amazing. And every book that I read said this one thing: don't make a decision on the first year. I am someone who likes to know what the plan is. I am a 2-time certified project manager. I need to know what it is that I need to do in order to move forward. And for you to tell me to not make a decision for an entire year, I mean, it's like, I'm like, how can I even survive? It's like being in limbo, because it's not knowing what's going to happen. And also it's a shot to your ego. You just found out this thing about your relationship and your marriage, and you're now choosing to leave this person. What does that say about me? It was such a conundrum to really sit there. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to sit for this year and not make a decision. I'm not choosing to leave. I'm not choosing to stay. I'm just choosing to be. And for me, I want to say that was the first step into this transformative experience of just being in the moment, where, because I was in such trauma because of what happened and what I found out, that I had to really focus on being right now. Edwina, it is August 30th, 3:05 p.m. Because if my mind went backwards, then it's like the impact I couldn't think forward because I had no idea what the future was. So it's like kept coming back to the now, kept coming back to the now. And what happens when you do that, when you focus on mindfulness and when you focus coming back to the now, you come back to your body. And for me, after 5 months of just being in this crazy loop of vortex, it's like, okay, I need to do something. I need to focus on the here and now. And again, being divinely guided, where I started getting more into support groups that dealt with, again, the trauma, a lot of experience. And then I kind of went into spirituality. So I found this course on prana, and prana is breath as a life force. And when someone is in trauma, it's like, come back to your breath. Breathe in, feel it through your nostril, go down into your belly, out through your chest. Whenever you're feeling like your mind is fleeting, come back to your breath. And to me, that was like a whole door that I had never crossed or even ventured into when we started talking about chakras and how your body like retains energies. And if they're not in alignment, it's not flowing, and how it manifests. So if like your root chakra, which is like your first chakra, and it has to do with safety. If your root chakra is blocked, you're not feeling safe. You're feeling like you're just not in space and time. You're unsafe. You're looking for validation externally. And as I started learning that, it's like, wow. From that, it's like I went into nature. So for me, connection to nature. So going into nature, going on in hikes, being with the sun, the trees, the animals, and coming back to myself and finding safety in nature, in my feet on the ground. So I live in Brooklyn, New York. And for me, walking on concrete, oh my God, I couldn't do it. So for me, I had to go into the trails. So walk through gravel, walk through the ground, feel your feet into the earth, feel the earth give way to you, but sustain you. Almost like the earth is telling you have a right to be here in this space and time. And as I started to come back to me, finding safety in my body, finding safety in myself, not in my marriage, not whether my husband is going to do the right thing or not do the right thing, whether my marriage is going to work out or not going to work out, who's going to find out, who's going to judge me, who's going to say this, and just finding safety within me. I mean, after that was just, for me, sky was the limit. And from there, I just dove into different things. It's a long journey, so I don't want to like go in a tangent, but when I talk about impactful as an adult, so now being on the other side of this, where, unfortunately, the marriage didn't work out, and it didn't work out because I was in a place of resentment or in a place of like, you did this, I can no longer be with you. No, it was just because I did my work, and it was 3 journeys. It was his healing, my healing, and the healing in the marriage. And I realized that my healing was not dependent on what he did or didn't do. The marriage was. Right. So if he could get into a space where we can kind of maybe heal our relationship, then the marriage could possibly work out. But if he didn't get to that space, it didn't mean that I had to stop my journey in my healing. So once I focused on that, I got to a place that I came back to me. I came back to my body. And I don't think I have ever been in my body, even before my marriage, even as a child. And when we talked about those experiences, I was conditioned to not look at the picture. I was conditioned to not even be in tune with myself, because if I did, it will let me know something was off. So when I finally came back to me, anything that felt like it was unsafe, anything that felt that didn't align with my truth, felt so uncomfortable in my body that there were things happening in our marriage, kind of like little milestones. And I knew, okay, if we hit this one, depending on which way it goes, I'm going to have to make a decision. And when that milestone happened and the thing that went, to the left, my body knew, it's like, Edwina, that's the answer. And coming back to that sense of peace, because when you're living in truth, when you're following truth, it just feels it fits your body, like truth fits. And for me, it's like, you know what? I love you. He is an amazing human being. But this, for me, it's no longer working. It's not healthy. It's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for me. It's not healthy for our children. So it's kind of like surrendering. So I let it go. And I want to say that I guess where I'm coming from in regards to being impactful as a person is when you go through something so devastating and you go through that dissolution of a relationship, it's easy to point the finger and say, you did this to me. And while you're doing that, you're absolving yourself of any action and accountability. And I want to clarify that by saying there's nothing that I did to make him do what he did. However, for me, one of my biggest aha moments is like, I didn't do anything to make him go, have an affair, etc. However, I chose to stay in that relationship for close to 15 years. Why? And that's where I needed to do my work. Like I stayed, what was the reason behind why I stayed? And that's where like my action came, coming back to me. So even now, like I said, I mean, he's an amazing human being. So when I talk about this topic, which can be so triggering for so many, it's doing it from a place of healing. It's like I allow that experience to completely break me open. Not so much about the marriage and the relationship, but who Edwina was as a person, how Edwina was navigating life, how Edwina was so disconnected from self, and coming back to me and finding myself, finding my spirituality, finding my higher self, learning all about boundaries, healthy boundaries, learning all about living in your authenticity. Because if I show up to a place and I do this or I say this, if Mike doesn't like it, guess what? That has nothing to do with Edwina. That is all about Mike. So I've gotten into this space. It's like, no, that's your stuff. You keep it. That doesn't make you any less of a human being. No, that's your stuff to deal with. It's not mine. And before, my walls were so permeable, like things would come in and out. And if something didn't fit, it was also now reacting from the place of judgment or criticism, because that was easier, right? Oftentimes people that go from a place of anger, projection, criticism, because it puts the focus on the other person and not you. So yeah, I mean, it's just being in this space that it feels so good to be where I am. And I always say, I'm not happy that I went through what I went through, but I am so grateful because this version of me, I love. And even people that knew me from before and know me now, like they see the difference, they feel the difference. And for me, like that is my message. It's like, there are certain experiences that you go through that are meant to break you completely open. I'm huge into books. There's a book that's called Broken Open by Elizabeth Lesser. And she talks about that. She talks about experiences, whether it's a divorce, whether it's the death of a child, whether it's an illness, that are so painful that if you lean into them, they're actually meant to break you open, like break your heart open in order for you to lean into that pain, sit with it, and then transform from it. It's almost like your Phoenix process. So for me, it's like really talking about that because it's like that's where the huge change happens, is when you're not afraid of that discomfort, but you're not so tied to the feeling of being comfortable. And oftentimes, even if you go through an experience, you want to get through that pain real quick because it feels awful. But no, it's like you have to lean into it. You have to be in that space because there's a huge teaching that's going to come from it. And for me, like, just sharing my experience and talking about more of the healing and less about the stuff that happened, but really talking about the healing and everything that I did to kind of get through that and coming back to myself and being on this other side of it. I think it's what's impactful because oftentimes we just constantly moving and we jump from one experience to the next because we're being driven by our ego, and ego wants to be happy and content and comfortable. So I'll pause there. That was a lot.
Look, listen, it was good. I was just like listening to your TED Talk because so many thoughts came up, even when you talked about your journey, which was almost parallel in the years of my journey of self-discovery, enlightenment. It's all these titles, right, that people get caught up on. And I said, I don't care what you call it, as long as you go or start your journey. And so much of what you talked about, even getting into the spirituality, was things that I experienced. And thankful for my bro that I connected with. We did a lot of bro studies, is what we called it, on Facebook. A lot of Facebook lives and some YouTube stuff. And bro study was where we were talking about all that stuff, the stuff they didn't tell us about breath and prana and your spirituality and your chakras and what it means to actually be enlightened or to be open to certain things, right? That you never thought about, or that was just over there. We can't talk about that because, first of all, I don't know how to explain it to you correctly because I don't know enough about it. So it's just got to be bad or not important, right? And so when you get over, that's why when you were saying all that, I was just, and even every time you talked about coming back to self, that journey has to start for you to even be able to know what it means to come back to self, right? And notice every time you said that you brought your hands back to the center, that place when you can bring things back to self and even get to that elevation in your mind where it doesn't matter. Like, I don't care what someone thinks, because that's not going to make or break me. So many times we're looking at the other person or what they think or what we should do based off of what they say, right? And we're forgetting about Mike. We're forgetting about Edwina. So that was just beautiful. And I know that people watching, like you say, a lot of things that you said could be triggering, but it also can be what you talked about, healing. So I know a lot of people will get a message from that and that healing. So I love the way you really painted a picture of what it means to go on that journey of self-discovery. Everything you talked about was literally that journey. You tap into different phases of it, right? Physical, spiritual, all this stuff mentally, and then learning what things really mean to you. It's beautiful and it's empowering. When you were talking about it, I can see how, it just lit you up and it fired me up. So even if you would have been talking another 5-10 minutes, I was like, yes. So that's why I was listening so intently. So in coming to the point where you are now, 2021 Edwina, today Edwina, the new you, talk to me about awaken your power and what that means to you and how you talked about kind of some of the things going on your journey, right, that got you to this point. But talk to me about that and what that means to you, because I see it and I hear it, and even the conversations we've had and the connection and the coaching and all that, I see it and hear it, but I want people to hear from you. So what does that mean to you, and tell us about that?
Yeah, so Awaken Your Power is the name of my coaching business. And I had formed an LLC over a year and a half ago. And at the time when I did it, I thought it was going to be about training and project management. And then I went through this experience. I was like, yeah, no, I can't do that. So after going through this, it was like, I was trying to I knew that I wanted to really come back what I call home. Like I said, my career started in mental health and really helping folks go through challenging times. And having gone through the experience, I was like, I want to go back to helping people heal, coming back to helping people really go through life challenges. And so I'm like, okay, I have this LLC. I need to come up with a different name. And I have a beautiful support system, which I call spiritual sisters, my tribe that really get it, have been through it with me thick and thin. And I'm like, I need to come up with a name, but everything that I kind of comes to mind, it's been taken. And I'm really keen now again that I'm honing into my intuition, really allowing that to be my guide. So when I think about words, what comes to mind, don't think about it like what's popping up to mind. How do you feel? And I was talking to her. We had a bunch of different names that we were playing with. And all of a sudden, I was like, I think it was 2 different names, and it stuck out Awaken Your Power or Awaken Power. And for me, what that says, it's like, even as a coach, and we would talk about, empowering, being able to empower ourselves. Like, you can't talk the talk if you don't really feel it. And for me, it's like, we all have that innately within us. We all have that power. We all have our intuition. Like, your intuition knows. It's just that we are so disconnected from it that we lose that touch or that ability to really tap into it. So for me, Awaken Your Power is that knowing that the power is already in there. It's all about that awakening. So whether it's you're choosing to do or to awaken it, whether you're having to go through experiences, but it's really coming back to the space that the power is already within you. So even as a coach, it's not my job to put the power in you, or here, let me tell you my journey and, we'll pull it from you. It's like, no, it's already in there. So let's work on that awakening and that you reconnecting to it. So for me, empowerment always comes back to it, and Awaken Your Power. It's just spoke to me. And I did create a logo for it, and it speaks to me, all the things that were in my journey. So the connection to earth, the connection to your chakras, the connection to your intuition,
is amazing, by the way, your logo. I'm going to have to find a way to put a link because your logo, it jumped out to me. And again, one of the reasons why I reached out to you early on as well, because of, it's like the old saying, right? Gang recognized gang, right? Like, so it was one of those, the imagery and all that, and even hearing you talk about your journey and so many of the words that you kept using, I was like, man, it's so dope. So your logo is amazing. So I that comes out, and again, that's why I say I see it, I hear it, I know just from our connection in the last few months, but I wanted people to hear that because it just is the ultimate reflection of your journey and what got you to this point, and the fact that you are continually every day awakening your power, and now you want everyone to do that. So it's so awesome to me. But go on. I interrupted because of the logo came. I was like, yes, I love that logo.
Okay. It's okay.
Love it.
I mean, I worked with actually a friend of mine. We went to high school together, and I knew he was in graphic design. And I reached out to him like, listen, I don't know what I want, but I'm going to describe to you what I'm going for. And he came back, and it was this beautiful back and forth where like he had no idea what my journey was. He didn't know what got me there. I just described this thing. He's like, okay, let me come back to you. He came back and I was like, oh my God. So even like the elemental circle, the elemental symbol for the earth, and the woman in the middle, she's black. She's a dark shade. And that happened to be almost by accident. I didn't tell him to make her, a dark shade, but he's like, oh, I actually have her in black. Do you want to see her? I'm like, yeah. And I saw it and I'm like, oh my God, that's it. And what stuck out to me is like shadow self, right? You cannot awaken your power until you dive into your shadow self. When you dive into those spaces that you do not want to recognize, you do not want to admit, no, like that's the bad side of me. No, that is where that power is, that duality. Both light and dark exist. There's power within that. So I love my logo. I had to say that because it does speak to everything that, to me, it's passionate. As you can see, I just light up every time I talk about it. So where am I in 2021? So yes, I am getting my coaching kind of business off the ground. And I have to say, I've been in a transition. I feel like I'm constantly in transition, right? So now being a single mom with 2 kids, just getting through a pandemic. So on top of everything that was happening in my life, COVID happened. So speak about things. I mean, I always say me and the universe have this very close relationship. I love my universe. She's amazing. And because, again, I'm a fighter, every now and then she just likes to create havoc. So every now and then it's like she just throws things around. And then when it happens, before I'm like, why is all this happening? Now I just laugh and I put a smile on my face. I'm like, okay, what is it that you want me to pay attention to? And it happened to me like 3 weeks ago. It was just a day where everything was just going wrong. And I had to take a pause and just smile. And it's like, okay, you want me to go inward. What is it that you want me to pay attention to? And for 2021, so my life, again, transition, still working 9 to 5. I just started teaching this year. So I'm teaching an undergraduate course in human relations. So it's all tied together. And also at the same time, really trying to put that focus on my coaching, because I don't want to just put it to the side because of all this stuff that's happening. So definitely want to honor it. And at the same time, when I started the coaching, I was so kind of focused on my journey, betrayal trauma, working with women who have been through similar experiences, because it's what I had gone through. So for me, it's like, that's it. It's my niche. It's the people that I want to work with. And now it's like, having been a little bit further along, it's like, no, Edwina, you have so much that you have gained so many experiences. And it doesn't have to be divorce. It doesn't have to be betrayal trauma. It could be so many other things that someone can go through that will kind of nudge them in that direction of stepping into that and really stepping into their power. So now it's like kind of opening up my focus a little bit more, that it doesn't have to be just this population. It's still very dear to my heart because I went through it. But at the same time, creating the space of not having to dive right into it right away, but kind of let it organically unfold. Because part of me, and again, that conditioning always, okay, I made a decision, go for it. And now it's like, no, it's like creating the space that things are going to organically happen. And when you allow that, things evolve. So what I thought back in June may be very different than what I thought from now, or maybe what happened in June applied, but now in August, you're adding another layer to it. So I think I'm in this space of just allowing things to organically kind of unfold, putting pieces together, but not being in a rush to kind of put everything in place and have it all be neatly packaged, and also creating space for myself. Because like I said before, I'm not like completely healed 100%. Healing is a journey. It's an evolvement. So it's also creating the space that I am continuing to discover parts of myself. Now I'm single Edwina at 40. What does that mean? What does she look like? Last time I was single at 25. So it's like creating the space to step into this evolved version of myself, and how does she navigate? Because I also discovered part of me is, okay, I finished that course, I'm going to take that course, I finished that support group, what's next? This fear of, if I don't lift this last rock, I'm going to leave something there and I'm going to miss a step, or right? So it's like, no, stop doing and just be. Because that's when it happens, when you just live and you have these experiences that you cannot apply that learning, that awareness. Edwina, are you having this experience? Doesn't feel right in your body. Your shoulders are getting rounded. Your chest is getting constricted. You feel a little bit foggy. What's going on? Like, that's when it happens, when you actually are going through the experience and you can apply those things. It's not in the support group. It's not on the call. It's not on the book. So yeah, I mean, 2021, Edwina is still working, Edwina is still evolving, Edwina is still healing, and at the same time, bringing all these pieces to the table and just organically allowing things to, evolve.
That's awesome. I think the biggest part of what you just said too is just being. Like, that's a special level. That's like cheat code in life. When you get to the point where you can just be. Like, because you want to do this, you want to fix that, you want to be here, you want to excel, you want to push this and pull back here. But when you can get to the point, like you said, coming back to self and tap into that prana and just breathe, taking that air, tap into what I like to say, your energy, not your ENERGY, but your INNERG, your inner God, and tap into what does it mean to awaken what's in here. And when you sit with yourself and listen to it, it's like, got it. Aha moment comes from that. But when we have all the distractions, it's hard to tap into that place, right? Because I got to do this. Okay. Yep. They said that's, okay. With that. So that's beautiful. I love how you said that, allowing to see how it unfolds. And then here's my 3 W's. The universe will align to give you what you want, will, and work for.
Yes.
And so that's going from the subconscious to bringing that thing out. It's in your will. Now you're working for it. It's going to meet you. I'm chasing it. No, you're chasing it. You're making it flee faster.
Yes.
So it's saying, like, here it is. Yes. Come to me. I open my arms, so beautiful. Edwina, listen, you even answered what's next, right? That last question, what's next for you in 2021, and just allowing that story to unfold and being you dropped so many gems, being mindful, just being, and tapping into yourself, getting back to self, right? Because we know it's so many things that draw us from getting in contact with ourselves. You talked about that conditioning and what everybody else is saying and what everybody else is doing. But the quicker you can get back to self and tap into that journey, I think is the quicker you can awaken your power, right? So what words or any final thoughts that you want to leave the people with in this amazing, again, I really appreciate you for doing this and just having this impactful conversation. Definitely impactful to me, means a lot, especially when people have went on their journeys and different things happen and they're able to tap into things from the past, whether it be good or bad, and paint that picture moving forward. So thank you for doing this. What do you want to leave the people with? This is your platform. in your space to share whatever you want to the people.
Honor self. I mean, for me, that is, when I talk about come back to self, I mean, it's like, I still go to therapy, right? And I'll be going through the foreseeable future. It's just great to have someone to bring perspectives to the table. And again, that ego pops in, right? So I was telling her, I was like, sometimes I get fearful that I'll get comfortable and I'll go back to my old habits. And she's like, that won't happen. And she was like, once your awareness reaches a certain level, it won't allow you to go back.
Hey, I know that's the truth.
For me now, like, that's it. Any situation that I'm in, it's like, honor self. How does this land for you? How does this feel for you? And yeah, I've been in situations like, no, I am no longer in a space. I will no longer allow anything to sacrifice how I honor self. So it's like, you do what you need to do for yourself. I would do what I need to do to honor me. And I think as long as you operate from that perspective, and not to do it from a way of like, being like, I'm better than someone else. No, it's just about that healthy boundaries for yourself and honoring your experience, honoring your feelings, honoring where you're at, honoring what you need in order to keep yourself in a healthy alignment. I have to say it all comes down to that, honoring yourself. And that can go into so many directions, but yeah.
Love it. I love it. Honor yourself and go be impactful. Just like bow, cherry on top, wrapped up, mic drop. Edwina, thank you so much for this. I appreciate it. I'll definitely leave any information that you want for people to reach out to you in the description below. Thank you for your time today and for having this impactful conversation with me. I appreciate you. And for everybody who's watched, thank you, thank you, thank you. Make sure you share, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time on another impactful conversation. Peace.
Thank you, Mike.